One example of these factors is the biggest mass movement in the Arab and the Muslim world, known as the Muslim Brotherhood. Here is a quote from the official announcement that was published in the website of the Muslim Brotherhood. President of the United States announced that U.S. Marine forces successfully assassinated Osama Bin Laden. The Muslim Brotherhood movement hereby declare they renounce the use of violence and assassinations. The Muslim Brotherhood maintained that a legitimate resistance against any occupation of a foreign state is a right justified by the heavenly codes as well as the international conventions. Confusion between legitimate resistance and the violence against an innocent people is intended by the Zionist enemy. End of quote of the announcement that was published by the Muslim Brotherhood. With your permission, I would like to elaborate a little bit about some of the terms that were mentioned in the public announcement that was published by the Muslim Brotherhood. In the contemporary terminology of the Middle East, the term the resistance, or in Arabic al-Muqawama, is the code name for terrorizing both Israelis as well as Arabs and Muslims who do not comply with the line dictated by the radical factors in the region. In the name of resistance, Hamas, the terror organization, fires thousands of rockets on Israeli cities. At the same time, in the name of resistance, Hamas is butchering his own brothers and people in the Gaza Strip that is occupied by the Hamas. In Lebanon, Hezbollah, the Iranian proxy, refuses to disarm itself in the name of resistance. Every day in different parts of the Arab and the Muslim world, hundreds of Muslims are butchered by their own brothers in the name of resistance. With your permission, I would like also to elaborate a little bit on another term that was mentioned in the announcement of the Muslim Brotherhood, and that is the heavenly codes. That term is the code name for the Islamic religious traditional law known as Sharia. According to the Muslim Brotherhood philosophy, the Sharia is the one and only way upon which mankind should live, and it should be implemented as such, one way or another. Another factor that is building and fueling the myth these very days is, no big surprise, Hamas, the Palestinian terror organization. Here is the announcement that was made by Ismail Haniyeh, the Prime Minister of the Hamas government that ruled Gaza Strip, following the killing of Bin Laden. We condemn the assassination of the holy Muslim warrior. We perceive the assassination to be the continuation of the American policy, which is based upon the oppression and bloodshed of Arabs and Muslims. End of announcement. This is the same Hamas that fires thousands of rockets on Israeli cities. This is the same Hamas that butchered hundreds of its brothers during the violent coup against the Palestinian Authority in June 2007 in the Gaza Strip. This is the same Hamas that terrorized every day its own people in Gaza Strip in order to endure its rule over Gaza Strip. But then on the other hand, no one should be really surprised by the announcement that was made by the leader of Hamas. After all, Hamas' main terror academy in Gaza Strip is named after Abdullah Azzam, a Palestinian in a region which was the mentor of Osama bin Laden and one of the founders of Al-Qaeda. Here is another example of the myth builders. This time it's not an organization, it's an individual, a journalist, a very influential journalist in the Arab and the Muslim world. His name is Mr. Abdel Bari Utwan. Mr. Utwan is the chief editor of the Arab newspaper Al-Quds Al-Arabi. Here is a quote from an editorial he published the day after Osama bin Laden was killed. That editorial is entitled by The Osama Bin Laden I Knew. Bin Laden was a simple man, modest, soft-talking. I remember that I asked him, "What is your biggest desire?" Bin Laden kept quiet for a while, and then he looked at me and said, with tears in his eyes, "I wish to be a martyr." Mr. Otwan went on to write, "The new generation of Al-Qaeda is by far much more dangerous than the old generation of Al-Qaeda. The generation that lived and was educated in the West. The generation that led the violent attacks in Madrid and London, as well as the attacks on American targets in 9/11. I do admit," says Mr. Otwan, "that I have a contradicting feelings towards Osama bin Laden, though I totally disagree with the ideology of Al-Qaeda, and I totally reject the attacks on civilians. I owe personal thanks to bin Laden for his role in two major milestones in my professional career as a journalist." End of quotes of the article. The next day, Mr. Otwan wrote a new editorial, this time under the title, "We will not believe until we see the body." Describing in this article the American administration as liars, Mr. Otwan adds and says, "Is it reasonable to believe that a man who fought the Soviets for 10 years and fought the Americans for 15 years will use his wife as a human shield? The American administration says it will publish a photo of Osama bin Laden. But we say right here and right now, this is not a proof as far as we are concerned. We aggravated when we hear the American presidents announce that justice was done. Justice should be carried out in a fair trial, where the defendant has the chance to present his case, even if he has already been convicted in the court of media or public opinion." End of quotes of that article. Mr. Otwan is clearly a master in building a myth. Sophisticatedly, Mr. Otwan is addressing the feelings of admiration that many Muslims have deep inside towards Osama bin Laden. Mr. Otwan has a very flexible moral spine. For the last couple of weeks, the Syrian regime has been brutally butchering its own people. In the rare instance that Mr. Otwan wrote about the situation in Syria, he was making a remarkable effort to be very gentle with the Syrian regime. However, in the case of Osama bin Laden, Mr. Otwan is, and I'm quoting, "deeply insulted to the point of aggravation with the fact that the USA was in fact, quote, in its action violating the sovereignty of another Muslim state, i.e. Pakistan." You may notice that Mr. Otwan describes Al-Qaeda's attacks in London and Madrid as a violent terror attacks, while describing 9/11 as an attacks on American targets. One possible explanation for that differences of approach may relate to the fact that Al-Quds Al-Arabi newspaper is published in London, where Mr. Otwan lives very comfortably. However, I would like to present a much more accurate and balanced picture. For that purpose, please join me in my next chapter. I am Avi Melamed. Thank you for watching.